The subprimal that we have here is the boneless beef strip loin. If we look at this subprimal, again, just as in the ribeye, we have a bone side or a belly side where the bones were removed from. If we turn that over, we have the external surface of the product where we see the external fat cover. This is actually the 13th rib surface here where we rib the carcass between the 12th and 13th rib. So the ribeye would actually be right here in front of the strip loin. If we go to the other end of this subprimal, we have what we call the vein end or the sirloin end. The boneless beef sirloin would be extension right here. It's been removed. This is what we now consider the vein end of the strip loin. The tail portion you can see here, this is actually a 1x1 strip loin, so it's a 1-inch tail on both on the rib end and on the vein end. We're measuring that from the edge of the loin eye muscle to the end of the tail. In trimming the strip loin prior to portioning, there's a couple things we want to do. First of all, the belly of the strip loin, we want to remove any heavy connective tissue or bone felt, as you might hear it referred to, from the belly surface. Here on the back side of the strip loin, we'll make a cut through here that exposes lean so that we can get rid of that heaviest portion of connective tissue. Again, it does not cook well, it won't break down during cooking, and it's not something that you want to serve to your guests. Last thing we'll do is trim the external fat surface down to specification. As always, when we begin portioning, we first want to take a face cut, a small cut here at the beginning to make sure that first steak is square in appearance. Then we begin portioning steaks. As we portion through and we see these center cut steaks, we come to this steak where we see the appearance of the gluteus medius muscle. If we turn this over, the gluteus medius, that extra muscle, is not apparent in the other side of this steak. So this is what we would consider a one-sided vein, which technically still is a center cut steak. The remaining two steaks here with gluteus, with the extra muscle on both sides, would be vein steaks, would not be considered center cuts. The subprimal we have here is lip-on ribeye. We'll utilize this subprimal to cut boneless ribeye steaks and also utilize this subprimal whole as a prime rib application. Today we'll portion this into ribeye steaks by removing the lip or the tail of this product that you can see here. We can also leave a portion of that tail on to cut some steaks. So if it's a 1/4-inch tail or a 1/2-inch tail or a 1-inch tail, whatever the specification may be, we can leave a portion of that tail or lip on the steak. Talk a little anatomy that you may hear. This is the external surface or the fat surface of the ribeye. If we turn it over, we see the bone surface or the belly side of the ribeye. You can see the rib fingers that we have here. These are where the rib bones were removed from the product itself. When we look at the ends of the product, this is what we consider the chuck end of the ribeye. You can see it has a smaller ribeye muscle or longissimus muscle, and it also has other accessory muscles around the outside. You can see some fat seams within. And these steaks, the steaks from this end, are typically a little thicker and also have more muscles and more seam fat throughout the cuts. Looking at the other end, this is where we rib the carcass between the 12th and 13th rib. This is the rib surface that would have been USDA quality graded. This particular subprimal, it was a 2x2 lip-on ribeye. What that means is the tail length or lip length of the product was 2 inches from the outer tip of the longissimus or ribeye muscle. And that goes for both ends, both the rib end and the chuck end. Again, trimming or fabrication of this subprimal, first thing we'll do is remove the entire lip. And we'll do this along with the heavy membrane of connective tissue that runs over the top side of this ribeye. So we'll go ahead and open this seam up, remove this membrane, and peel the lip down from that. So in removing the lip, we also want to remove this heavy seam of connective tissue or membrane that over the top side of the ribeye. So we'll pull that down. There's a natural seam there. We'll remove that. As we open this up around the bottom, you can see the natural curvature that we follow down through the seam. And then we'll separate with a knife cut the entire lip from the ribeye muscle. Now that we removed the entire lip, This would be considered a ribeye roll lip off. Now we'll do some more trimming from this point before we portion steaks. And what we'll want to do is trim the rib fingers down, make sure they're fully attached at all points, and trim those down to a specified thickness. Here you can see we've trimmed down the rib fingers where the rib bones were removed from this product. Now we'll go to the back side of this product. We'll trim this down as this product does not cook well, does not break down during cooking, so it ends up being extremely tough and gristly if it was left on a steak. At this point, we have finished what we would consider the pre-trim process. All we have to do now is portion individual steaks from this subprimal. In portioning, we always begin with the chuck end. We do this because we want to standardize and make everything consistent in how we work. So we start portioning from the chuck end with a small face cut to make this a square cut, and then we portion individual steaks. We always want to start from the same end because we know that densities between these cuts, these particular steaks, are different than the densities here because we do have more fat and more seams in this end of the ribeye. As we portion these steaks and we look at the lean color, you can see that the lean is extremely dark, almost a kind of purple color. The reason is this, when this muscle is intact prior to portioning, there's no oxygen allowed to touch the surface of that meat. When the oxygen is taken away from meat, the lean color becomes extremely dark, just as you may see in some of the vacuum packaged steaks that come to your restaurants. But after we cut these and these begin to sit on the table for a few minutes, they'll begin to bloom. The lean will turn to a bright cherry red color. So as we go, we'll finish portioning this subprimal, and you can see the difference of shapes and sizes of these steaks as we move from the chuck end down to the rib end. You can also see the difference in fat content as we move through to the rib end. As we get into these steaks 2, 3, 4, 5, you can see the heavier kernel fat, what we call kernel fat, the large portion of fat here between the muscles. As we go through then towards the rib end, you can see we begin to get a larger eye muscle and less seams within, less muscles present and less seams of fat present than within those steaks. Marbling is the driving factor of the final USDA quality grade. This particular subprimal was a USDA choice graded subprimal, and that was graded right here again. That last steak on the strip end where we separated the ribeye from the strip loin between the 12th and 13th rib. This again is the only place that you can officially grade the carcass. And you can see as we move up in the animal towards the head of the animal and you get towards the chuck end of this ribeye, you can see a little bit more marbling. Now marbling will change, will be heavier or lighter depending on where you are in the muscle or in the carcass. So to recap on the ribeye here, this is the lip-on ribeye, the raw material that we started with, the boneless lip-on ribeye. We've trimmed that. The main trimming we've done is taken the lip off and trimmed also the rib fingers and the heavy connective tissue. We've portioned these steaks, and again we can look at chuck end steaks versus rib end steaks and see the differences in those, especially in fat content and muscle makeup. So we portioned the product, and now looking at our finished product, here's the finished product in the vacuum package, 2 steaks side by side under vacuum.